Hello, everyone, and a very good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for joining me for this webinar brought to you by ET Retail in association with N7, the Nitrogen platform. Now, around the topic of redesigning cybersecurity for digital commerce companies, one thing that we have seen is that digital commerce has always been a lucrative target for cyber criminals, being a treasure trove of personal and financial data. And the big shift towards digital channels of commerce over the last 2 years has led to an unprecedented rise in cyber attacks on digital commerce. So not only is there a rise in the volume of attacks, but also in the level of sophistication of the attacks as the bad actors increasingly leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies. Now, cyber criminals are upping the ante with newer and highly sophisticated weapons of attacks and attack techniques that are powered by AI. And there are new cyber actors emerging and threat vectors veering into new fields, leading to newer and unknown threats that are more devastating than ever in terms of both their scale and impact. Now, as the attacks increasingly veer towards greater sophistication and automation, the challenge is further exacerbated for the IT and the security teams of the digital commerce companies. Now, bad actors are taking advantage of AI ML to launch new class of subtle and stealthy attacks without human intervention, including large-scale denial of service attacks, automated bot attacks, and automated ransomware attacks is something that we are also now seeing going forward. According to a study, 57% of all attacks recorded on the digital commerce websites were carried out by bots in 2021, compared to 33% for all other industries. In fact, automated bot activity is a pervasive threat for digital commerce. The proportion of sophisticated bad bots on digital commerce websites also grew in 2021. Now, this breed of bot is the hardest to stop because they produce mouse movements and clicks that resemble human behavior. And sophisticated bots evade simple defenses and are responsible for account takeover, fraud, denial of inventory that makes it harder for the legitimate users to get to the goods that they want to. Similarly, if you look at the denial of service attacks, they're becoming increasingly automated and more difficult to prevent. So in the age of digital commerce, cybersecurity is inhibited by the advanced, intelligent, data-obsessed cyber threats that leverage the likes of AI and application-level attacks. So as a result, the conventional defenses that companies have been used to, like the basic network firewalls or captcha-based authentication, are no longer sufficient for security. They instead end up dampening the user experience on the sites, making them lose precious customer traffic and revenue. So the answer lies in equally intelligent defense technologies, AI-powered multi-layered defense mechanisms like zero trust systems, two-factor authentication, and tamper-proof tokens, among others. However, the implementation of all these new age technologies must be prudent and effective. And in today's discussion, we are going to look at how the cyber criminals are upping the ante using AI and how digital commerce companies can defend against these attacks using equally intelligent defense technologies. So to join me for this conversation, please welcome my esteemed panelists. I have with me Mr. Rajesh Dalal, Vice President, IT Infrastructure and Security at MakeMyTrip, Mr. Shashwat Singh, CIO of both, and Mr. Gautam Gurtoo, co-founder and CTO N7, the Nitrogen platform. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shipra.
Thanks, Shipra.
Thank you. So let me start with you, Rajesh. And the malicious actors that we are seeing today are getting more creative with their attack techniques. They're launching more sophisticated attacks that I spoke about, and that not only maximize the damage, but are also difficult to detect. So in your experience, what new trends around hacking techniques are you noticing within your organization? And what is your biggest concern with the way in which these new and more sophisticated cyber attacks are being carried out?
Sure, Shipra. So, Shipra, gone are the days wherein you have rightly said the network firewalls used to be the first line of defense for any organization, right? Now, the threat levels have increased over the period of last couple of years, right, which have more targeted towards the endpoint security. So the endpoint security, especially given the last 2 years of pandemic time, has seen the biggest threat in any organization. Because that's one of the easiest way for a hacker to intrude into a personal system and get into organization's network, right? Whether it's through a phishing email or through a social networking hack, all of these have contributed towards new threats to the organizations, and we have been working towards mitigating them using a host of services wherein we could proactively detect and also eliminate the threats.
Shashwat, what is your take on some of the new techniques that are being deployed by the malicious actors in terms of how they are launching the attacks, how they're becoming more sophisticated, and what is your biggest concern around that?
Sure. Thanks, Shipra. Well, so, according to me, it's a cat and mouse game, right? The attackers are getting smarter by the day, and therefore, the defense mechanisms that we are putting across in our organizations also have to keep evolving. And we were discussing this earlier in one of the other panels, wherein DevOps is not something which would hold us together anymore. It is DevSecOps, which has to, be inculcated in the organization right at the start. Right from the developers, everyone else in the organization has to be fully cognizant of what threats can come in and how do they start, catering to it right at the start. So security has now become mainstream. And it starts right from awareness. So the entire organization needs to be aware of what kind of threats might come in and what is it that they need to do. So Rajesh was mentioning about phishing emails, right? And for an unsuspecting end user, a phishing email might just get under the carpet, and they might not really be able to detect as to what that they've been phished, right? So it starts right at the start by building in awareness in the organization, ensuring that everyone is aware of what possible threats can come in, and to build security right into the design of an application that we're putting across. So that's what my understanding of the topic is, Shipra.
Okay, thanks Rajesh and Shashwat for those opening remarks. So Gautam, I would like to come to you now. So I have a question, but I would also like you to, beyond that question, also take us through some of the trends that you are seeing as far as cyber attacks on the digital commerce space is concerned. So one is that we are already seeing the sixth generation of cyber attacks becoming mainstream. So what are the next level of cyber risks and new age cyber threats that you foresee that digital commerce companies need to be prepared for? And how are you seeing cyber attackers leveraging AI ML to enable faster, better targeted, more destructive and difficult to detect attacks? So besides answering that question, if you can just take us through some of the trends and the opening remarks from your side.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Shipra. So there are a lot of things which have led to the attackers evolve themselves a lot. There are a lot of AI tools which are being used by attackers these days. And if you can see the slides, I've just tried to articulate this better here. As mentioned, Rajesh mentioned it very well, that there are gone are the days when network layer attacks were there. They are still there, but since the systems are so capable, they are no longer a concern. We still see a lot of packet flooding and IP-based attacks coming onto the systems, but they are easily managed by current network layer firewalls. But what is really happening in last few years is that attackers have evolved themselves into, first they tried to scrape the data from the websites, then their DOS and DDoS attacks used to come as volumetric attacks. And then came the evolution of attackers that they started to exploit the web applications with SQL injection, cross-site scripting, remote or local file injections. They were really causing damage at this point because they were extracting information or getting credential stuffing in there. But today's attackers are actually masquerading themselves as legitimate users, and that creates a very big challenge because they are getting indistinguished from the real traffic. So there comes the problem of what is a real request or what is a malicious request. And I also want to distinguish between web apps versus APIs. You know, this whole segment of web application and API protection is actually web app versus APIs. There are two different ways. OWASP has been raising this, that web apps and APIs are different from quite some time now. And they have put top 10 threats to web apps and APIs in separate lists. We don't need to go through all of them, but this is something for you all to take back and review that your systems, whether it's web apps, APIs, obviously mix of all the both the things, are they being protected well from both perspectives? And this also we see in our data, which we see that over the last few years, attacks, that's not a surprise, attacks have greatly increased, but web apps and versus APIs, we see 2x increase in APIs compared to web apps. You know, web apps attacks have increased 4.5 times versus 2.2 times. Another side of this is how effective the tools are in blocking them. Now, a lot of time we see these terms floating around that there are false positives and false negatives. Now, if a tool focuses on reducing the false positive, that means that legitimate customers got blocked because the tool was not able to distinguish between a malicious attack versus a real attack. So it takes a preventive approach and blocks it. Obviously, that's damaging to business. So what teams and tools tend to do is stop using that rule and let the traffic go through. But that opens up a possibility of false negative where attackers will, have a free reign, and you will not have a clue at all. It will just go through unnoticed. So that's a very important thing to review in any tool or your process, that you are not simply removing rules from your system to allow false positive to gain control. So then we did an analysis of around 500 sites. And these are the numbers which you can see that rule-based WAF was there in 32% of the sites, which is good. 15% sites actually had a WAF, but they were not blocking it. So that's another dangerous thing, that if you only log, WAF is not useful. When it comes to DDoS protection, only 15% of those 500 sites were really blocking things. That's scary. Captcha protection was there in 35% of sites, but captcha is actually a damper to UX. So it's not really a good thing overall, as far as we think. It's protecting people, sure, but it's actually damaging your business. So that's not good either. Bot protection was there, only 19%. AI ML protection was only in 5% of those sites. So that's not a good sign. A lot of these commerce sites have no clue that they are being attacked, because attackers are so sophisticated these days that they are no longer flooding your system and your site crashes. Oh, then your team then realizes it's blocking, it's attacking. So you take measures. So unknowingly, you're letting your sites being hacked and you have no clue. So that's something to really consider. Now, a quick review of what the tools are there in the market. So what we see is speed and security are two measures which must be taken into consideration for all evaluations. So security, of course, needs to be high, but it should not add a performance penalty to your system. So what we did is just an overall thing, different types of tools out there right now, and there's measure of how good they are in terms of security versus speed. Another aspect is licensing costs, of course. and the manageability of the system. Is the system totally independent, or your team has to do spin wheels to really measure it? So that's another criteria to look through and see where it is. In putting this in perspective, nitrogen has a multi-layer system. So we have the basic layer, blocking traffic to your direct to your origin servers. We have network firewalls. We have the usual thing of request caching. What people forget is request caching is also a security measure, because that request which gets served from the edge cache will not let the attacker reach your servers. It's a very important aspect, and obviously it improves the performance as well. Win-win. Then we have DDoS mitigation layer. DDoS mitigation layer also has to be flexible. You cannot have one rule. Different parts of a site, search or shopping cart, they're two different things. They need to be protected slightly differently. Different rules need to happen there. Then black and white listing of sources. Then WAF rules need to be really personalized to your site. It cannot be just one thing for everything. It's not a democratic world. Your application is different. Your attackers are actually tuning their attack to your application. So the rules need to be equally personalized to the attack as well as your functional behavior of the site. Then comes the tamper-proof token system, which we have. We call it human detector. So we have a system where we issue tamper-proof tokens to the users automatically behind the scenes, transparent. And if those tokens are tampered by the attackers, we'll know and we can block it. And this is sort of a captcha-less captcha system that we can understand based on the traffic pattern and the tamper-proof tokens that this is a real human on the other side or a malicious agent. Then another layer which we are building is two-factor auth and the API and authentication and authorization layer. So that really improves and completes the whole picture from the security perspective. So it's not just that the attackers are evolving. We also need to evolve along with that. Otherwise, things will be, without us knowing, we are getting attacked.
Thanks, Gautam. Rajesh, looking at some of the data points that that Gautam had in his slides, what is your take on some of those data points that show a growing spate of attacks on the digital commerce companies, and especially the increasing use of AI in those empowering those attacks. So one is that, and secondly, I also want your take on headless or API driven platforms. How are you seeing that within your organization, and where do you think companies usually hit a roadblock with APIs or GraphQI or headless systems, and how to address those?
So Shipra, I think Gautam has rightly pointed out the new attack surface, which is being targeted on the web apps and the APIs, which are being hosted across the e-commerce and the digital commerce platforms, right? And bot is one of the biggest category of threat for any organization today, because it's not only threatens your organization from a security incident, it also increases your cost of the cloud resources, because you have to continuously serve those bots. So an intelligent threat analyzing system which works on user telemetry, behavior, and patterns. That's the way to block the bots. The traditional WAF, signature-based WAFs, will not be able to block the intelligent bot attacks which are happening today with the use of artificial intelligence and a lot of other sophisticated tools, because no more the bots are manual bots. It's all automated bots which keep on hampering your applications. And what was the second part of the question? If you could just repeat, I missed that out.
So my second part of the question was that we are seeing a lot of organizations now migrating towards headless or API-driven platforms. So are you also moving or planning such a move as well? And what are your concerns around about APIs, GraphQL or headless systems from a security standpoint?
See, from an organization perspective, we are completely moving on towards microservices and API-based model. So that is the way you got to scale up in a cloud-based environment, right? And at the same time, when you are going into microservices and API level uh, exposures, your threat levels also increases. So we are equally deploying tools and practices in place to protect our digital assets.
Okay, thanks. Shashwat, similar question. What are you moving towards headless or API-driven platforms, or if not, are you planning such a move as well? And any concerns around that, around APIs or headless systems that you have?
Sure. No, so absolutely, as Rajesh pointed out, right? Headless is the way to go for almost all the e-com players now. If they really want to have best-in-class user experience being extended to their users without having a dependency on the platforms on which they've hosted their e-com channel per se, headless is definitely the way to go. Now, what we are doing in our organization at least is we do have a very stringent maker checker control put in place, wherein there is an organization who's doing the headless development for us, but there's an organization who's uh, validating and auditing the application at each of its stages. So not just in the entire SDLC at each and every stage when we do a design gate, there also there is an there is a detailed discussion between the two players, to ensure whether all the security concerns have been taken care of or not. So that's what is being done now to hedge the risk. But as I said earlier as well, it's a cat and mouse game, and therefore having an intelligent threat detection system in place, which lets us very clearly segregate between an actual malicious human driven attack that is coming our way or a bot driven attack coming our way, that is definitely the need of the hour. And we would definitely need a system in place to be put in, which is able to understand the source of the attack, and then have mechanisms in place to be able to counter it without having an adverse impact on the user experience as well. Back to you.
Yeah, Gautam, in fact, you alluded to the headless and headless system and API driven platforms in your slides as well. So where do you usually see companies hitting a roadblock with APIs or headless systems, and how do they address those?
Yeah, of course. So as we know, there is a big wave starting, and I say it's just starting of modernization of digital commerce, and microservices and headless commerce is the way to go for many commerce sites. Not everything, but most of the big volume sites will migrate into an architecture of microservices and headless. Once we have this API systems, actually we are creating this API architectures so we can be very agile from a business perspective. We can scale better, but this is also helping the attackers because they can be very efficient with APIs. They don't need to parse and extract information from pages and stuff. They simply get a nice JSON object which is ready-made and take it. And API system security is quite different than a web app security. And another technology which is very gaining grounds is GraphQL. So GraphQL is another type of API system where the client decides what type of information or how much information will be sent by the server. In a traditional API, server decides what do I want to send to the client. Now, GraphQL is designed to make your API systems even more efficient because less information will be, less work on all sides. But it creates a challenge because GraphQL creates, uncountable combinations of request types because every client can decide, oh, I only want this, I only want that, and that sort of thing. And that creates a very big, surface area for attackers to come and get to your information. So GraphQL systems were actually not designed to be exposed in the web, but we have exposed it. There's no running out of it. It has its own value. So creating a layer which is outside of your microservices architecture is the way to go to protect all APIs in GraphQL. There is a value, as Shashwat mentioned, that you have a system where it should be there as part of the software development lifecycle, which is focusing on security. But that security is now. because the developers are building the system now and they should be securely building it. But once that system is out there in production, over time, whether it's a few minutes or days, a lot of code will continue to run the same way for months and years, because that's what you're building. You don't want to keep inventing. But evolution is happening outside. Attackers are going to start attacking it. So SDLC is very important, but having a offloaded system for security where responsibility is not actually by the code, it's actually by that external layer, which is away from your internal systems, it's at the edge, is the way to go for all APIs and GraphQL systems. And obviously that layer needs to be bolstered with AI, machine learning, traffic analysis, and all sorts of multi-layer systems. It cannot be just one. Plus, it cannot just be, machines. It needs to be a humanly managed system as well.
Right, right. So I'll take a short pause here, and I would like to tell the people in the audience that we will be taking up questions towards the end during the Q&A session. So if you have any questions for any of our panelists, you can drop them in the Q&A box that you can see at the bottom of your screen, or you can also send them to us over chat, and we will take those questions towards the end. So coming back to you, Rajesh, now when we are talking of attacks that are highly sophisticated, that are highly automated, that also means that the defenses have to really be beefed up to become equally intelligent. So, how do you see, how do you see your cybersecurity tools and strategy being beefed up, and how are you leveraging AI ML to counter and neutralize these next generation of AI-powered cyber threats?
So from an organization perspective, we have deployed multiple layers of security, right? Starting from the parameter to the application to the endpoint, right? However, that doesn't ascertain that we are free from any threats, right? Because attacks can keep happening at multiple facets where the organization is digitally present. So we collect all those logs and get shipped to a centralized location where it's basically a machine learning based model which learns the traffic patterns and alerts our SOC teams, which helps us eliminate those threats on almost on a real-time basis. Because you could always deploy tools, best of the tools in class, right? But if you do not act on time on the alerts and the threats received and do not correlate them, then those tools and the investment goes for a waste. You're still vulnerable.
So, Shashwat, how are you leveraging AI and ML, and how are you integrating more intelligence into your cybersecurity strategy? How are you adopting more AI-powered tools to defend against and to mitigate some of these new age attacks that we are seeing that are highly automated and sophisticated?
Right. So we have a two-pronged strategy here. One, rather than taking a multi-cloud approach, we are hosted on a single cloud. Almost all of our applications on that one single cloud, and we do have heavy reliance on security features and tools being provided by the cloud service provider to ensure the applications are secure by design, and they're also in a position to cater to some of these attacks that are coming through. The second one is we do have a tie-up with a couple of partners who are on an ongoing basis auditing our applications. They are doing, they're staging these attacks as well for us to ensure how the application readiness is there. All that said and done, we've suffered a couple of DDoS attacks as well, and a couple of others. I mean, so for us, it is evolving. Just 6 months back, we were heavily reliant only on WAF, and we did not have a lot of tools and agreements as well with service providers to be able to help us out with that. But as I said, I mean, two-pronged approach there. One, heavy reliance on the enterprise grade cloud service provider to have inbuilt security features, and for their solution architects to be auditing our application on an ongoing basis. And the second, to tie up with a partner who does continuous audits on our websites as well as our apps, and also does rehearse these attacks and see and kind of comes back on the readiness and how many of these attacks have gone through, and what is then on an ongoing basis, what is the measure that is being put in. But just to be honest, to be able to put in a really cutting edge tool that takes care of all of these malicious attacks that are coming our way is something that still needs to be done.
So Gautam, what is your take on that? On what Shashwat is saying, that when it comes to a tool that really takes care of all the sophisticated attacks is yet to be there? And secondly, another question that I have for you is, while we are seeing that organizations are adopting AI, and AI is becoming an integral part of the cybersecurity tech stack and a key tool in their arsenal against cyber criminals, there is still a lot to be done when it comes to optimally leveraging AI in cybersecurity. So what do you see as some of the challenges that digital commerce businesses face when it comes to optimally leveraging cybersecurity that is built or powered by AI, and any best practices that you suggest to leverage AI's game-changing approach to solving the complex problems in cybersecurity?
Sure. So one thing is still true, that police will come after the attack is over. So even if we use and call AI to stop attackers, attackers are using it better, and they continue to do that. AI is definitely a must-have these days, because the attackers are using it. You need to have the same level of technology to even attempt to block them. See, I'll give you a simple example. So a DDoS attacks is happening. Probably 5-6 years ago, if a DDoS attack is, let's say 100-500 requests per minute is coming on a site, and it's trying to scrape the site or just kill the site, we used to put a rate limiting system and stop, let's say, anything over 100 requests per minute. And attackers used to continue on 500 requests per minute, and they get blocked. Nowadays, attackers are sensing that we are blocking it. They are sensing that we are blocking at 100, so they come at 99, 98 requests per minute. So our system evolves, automatically learns into and say, now put a block at 80. There's a whole cat and mouse thing going on, but at some point you're going to come down at 5 requests per minute. That's a very normal, legitimate traffic. You can't use it anymore. DDoS rate limiting, however flexible it is important, but is losing its value. You need to then put an AI system to understand the traffic patterns, not just number of requests per minute, how a human behaves compared to how a machine is programmed to attack. Now, that is something which we did 4 years back. Attackers have evolved again. So now what they do is they record sessions of a real human, not just one, different patterns, and then replay that behavior which was recorded, and that creates a very different request patterns. AI systems are grappling to keep up with those request patterns and figuring out that this is a malicious pattern or this is a legitimate user pattern. So this is the fight which continues to happen. On top of it, if we just see that you are using AI, AI solutions are not deprecating the traditional solutions. If we think AI solution is good enough, we go with that. It's not going to work. There is a multi-layer approach which needs to be there. It's not that old systems are outdated. Network firewalls are still very important. Whitelisting and blacklisting is still very important. AI systems, rule-based WAFs, evolution, auto configurability of rule-based WAF, auto sensing that there is a false positive going on. On top of it, tamper-proof tokens coming in, traffic pattern analysis happening. These are all building up into the same system. If we have separate systems to do this, then there is a performance penalty. So there has to be a thought through approach, not siloed approach, especially when we are in a microservices world. Every security should not be responsibility of the microservice, because then each microservice may be doing it differently and we are going to lose the intelligence happening across. There has to be a layer which takes care of security, and a layer which is smart enough to handle all these multiple layers together.
So, in fact, on that point, Gautam, when you're talking of the security layer in a digital commerce environment, now what is really important is that it cannot be inhibitive, because ultimately customer experience, user experience takes the lead when it comes to any digital commerce platform that we see today, and the security cannot be at the risk of losing the user experience, and that is a big challenge, and I think that is something that IT and security leaders still continue to struggle with. So Rajesh, what is your take on that? I mean, do you struggle to balance user experience and security, and any best practices that you would like to share around how digital commerce businesses can better balance user experience while safeguarding their critical data and assets?
All the digital commerce companies or any companies who are present in the digital ecosystem need to understand their customer at the very first layer of their perimeter, right? And like Gautam just mentioned, it has to be a multi-layered approach, not just an inspection of firewall rules or maybe some signature-based rule. It has to more to do with understanding the user behavior, deciding the user device telemetry, right, and the user behavior in terms of what kind of content is user being generated. So if as long as we can enhance the rule sets at the perimeter itself, it eliminates any other bottlenecks once the user is inside your system to complete a transaction. So the most focus for any organization, like for us, our most focus is to focus at the perimeter itself. So we do an origin blocking, and at the origin itself, we have ensured that we cover up the major security threats over there and contain them. Only the legitimate request reaches finally to our servers. So from a customer friction point, the intent and the goal is pretty much clear. Customers should not uh, get confused or bounced off due to the security implementations at our side. Customer experience should remain same.
Right, Shashwat, have you found the silver bullet to this? How do you really ensure that without compromising one for the other, the user experience or the security? How do you really ensure that you are able to balance both? So, if you have any learnings and best practices to suggest from your experience.
Well, so not yet, Shipra. We're still on the lookout for that silver bullet, of course. And when the org priority is to scale up our own website, our own D2C website, right? And when you're competing against the e-com giants, right? User experience is paramount for us. Customer experience and the click-through rate. How many clicks does it take for them to check out? How easy or difficult we are making it for them is the top priority for us. And therefore ensuring that at the same time we're able to understand what are the kind of threats coming our way. It is a difficult task. As some of the best practices, one that has been working well for us at least is the maker checker control that I spoke of, right? So right from the design stage of an app that we want to build in, ensuring that security is being factored in as a important ingredient is something that has worked well for us so far. But we are definitely on the lookout for a partner or a tool, which can actually ensure that we are in a position to mitigate all of these risks that are coming our way, and at the same time ensure that the customer experience is important. It's paramount for us, and it's not getting compromised at all.
Thanks for sharing the candid view, Gautam. While most of the organizations haven't really found the answer to this conundrum of how do they balance the two, and in the world of digital commerce where speed, agility, scale are equally important as as security. And user experience is a factor of all these components put together. So how can organizations, maybe they haven't reached there yet, but how can they start making the progress in terms of ensuring that they bring in the balance between security and user experience?
We designed nitrogen system just to actually get rid of that conundrum. See, if you talk about performance and security, as such, they are NFRs, non-functional requirements. They're usually considered overheads, but they should not be. They are the critical parts these days. Security and performance has to be the business functionality in the mindset that needs to be there. Now, if you come to the technical side of things, if we are designing a system, an e-commerce system from the server side, headless, APIs, whatever you want to take it, the fundamentals remains the same. If I am there to design a very performant system or a very secure system, I will lose business agility, because highly efficient systems and highly secure systems are difficult to change. Systems should be designed for business agility. Technology is not the king. Business is the king. Business should be driving this, and it is the responsibility of the technology teams to provide that business agility. Hence, we designed nitrogen, because we were fed up of having this conundrum in our systems. So we created a layer outside of the systems which are being developed. Systems should be developed from business agility, hand over the performance and security concerns to nitrogen. However is your system designed, doesn't matter whether it's insecurely coded or very poor performance encoded, nitrogen will make it faster and more secure. So there is no compromise between speed and security in nitrogen layer. We have created the optimization. That we actually started with optimization. We understood the traffic, the devices, the networks, the geographical location, what type of compute power is on devices, what kind of network connectivity is there, and then optimize the whole system for it. Then we built security on it, because we were already creating a AI-based system, a machine learning system, which understood all these factors. The objective was at that time to optimize it. Then we switched it into security, and that created this win-win situation in the whole system, that our underlying system is to understand user behavior, and we can optimize for speed and put security layers on top of it in one go. There is no network hops. Network is optimized. Your application is optimized. You don't need to change your code on your server side. It simply is a layer at the very edge of the system, blocking anybody reaching you, only the real customers.
Great, thanks. So before we wrap up our discussion, I want to take the questions that have come from the audience. So Rajesh, I can see that you have answered the two questions. Shashwat and Gautam, if you want to take a go on these questions. So one question is from Shivji Kushwaha. He's asking, what type of security audit is justified as on date to be on the safer side? And maybe Rajesh, you would like to elaborate on your response further.
I think no security audit can give you an assurance that you are secure. Security audit is essential and should be done, and the recommendations of security audit should be adopted.
Okay. Shashwat and Gautam, you want to answer that question?
Go ahead, Shashwat.
The one asked by Shivji. Yeah, okay. No, so I agree with what Rajesh is saying, right? I mean, audits are, again, almost like a post-mortem, right? And you probably realize how many attacks have gone through. So you have to do it as frequently as you can, but it does not assure you of anything. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So audit are for compliance and governance. They don't mean a thing. It's a certification. It's like going to a college, I have a certificate. That doesn't mean anything of my knowledge levels. My I had 89% in my exams, or I got 99%. It doesn't mean anything when it comes to the real world, but it is necessary because it tells you a picture that you have not missed a few things in your system, a very, checklist based system that tells you are on track or you should change your track. But in reality, audits do not mean security. They simply means governance. Having a more secured system actually is up to the team of people you have. People are the real thing. Systems are only there to help your people team. Now we keep saying AI, and most people think AI or believe that AI means artificial intelligence, which does, but I don't believe artificial intelligence is actually the answer. Augmented intelligence is the answer to solve this. Computers are good at something that you give them a task and they can repeatedly do the same things. Artificial intelligence in computers helps computers to find patterns and do the same thing, but they need to find the patterns. There is a real intelligence in our team. That really makes or breaks the thing. If this artificial intelligence is provided as a tool to the real team of people, they actually complete the picture. This is where, attackers are lacking, because attackers create these programs and run them loose in the world, and they are just doing the same thing again and again. Yes, attackers are changing, but to block an attack, you need augmented intelligence where you are finding the computers are telling a lot of things and the team is using it to keep evolving in near real time. Obviously, the computers are blocking it, but the team is also should not be discounted. And audit simply tells that team that you are doing the job right or you need to evolve.
Right. So there are two questions from Rachit. His first question is that while the attempts are being made to protect the organization from the external cyber attacks, how do we see the insider threats as an agent of cyber attacks? Rajesh, you want to take that?
So insider threat, given especially these pandemic times, has become the biggest threat for any organization, right? Because with people working from home, the security controls, the firewalls which you have deployed in the office network while you are working are no more present at your home. So insider threat, especially with the phishing and social engineering hacks which have been happening in the last 1.5 years, I think that's a bigger threat to me than being an external threat.
Shashwat, how are you looking at insider threats within your organization?
Well, so I would probably
Of...
break this down to two, intentional and unintentional, right? So intentional insider threats, I think Rajesh talked about it. Now there is unintentional internal threat as well, right? And that's largely a factor of people not knowing what they don't know. And as a result of which, what are the best practices that they should be following? What are the common things that they should look at if there's a mail that is landing in their inbox, which seems to be coming in from from a sender who's not in their contact list, right? What is it that they should do? How do they go ahead and report phishing? So awareness entirely across the organization, starting from the top to the bottom, right? That is one bit that would help us take care of these unintended internal threat that might get created. Back to you, Shipra.
So Gautam, while awareness is obviously one key aspect when it comes to dealing with internal threats, from a technology standpoint, do you have any suggestions in terms of how to mitigate these kind of threats?
Yeah, so I think I'll definitely echo Rajesh and Shashwat. I agree. The solution is basically in adopting zero trust architecture, where whatever we think, VPN is dead. VPN is no longer effective. We are living in a world where all the team is working remotely, and doing a VPN kills their productivity. And it creates two systems of security, internal security and external security. And that's the question. Just get rid of VPN systems in your architecture, not just right away, because you need to think about it, but that should be the direction. And that will lead to zero trust systems where there is no distinguish between internal and external. Everything should be considered external and use the same sophisticated protection systems and same layers of security. Internal people should not be trusted, as unintentionally they may be harboring malicious code in their laptops or whatever, so many things. So, but zero trust systems will create a single layer of security, which is very sophisticated in all aspects and protecting you from internal as well as external threats exactly the same way.
Great. Thank you so much. I think it is time to now wrap it up. Thank you so much for your inputs and to the audience as well for the questions. It was a great session and it was a pleasure talking to all of you. One thing that I want to leave everyone with is that, when it comes to digital commerce, I want to allude back to the last question and the answer there in terms of finding the right balance between user experience and security is something that is no longer good to have. It is a must-have for all digital commerce platforms. And as they look at striving that balance, they will have to relook at some of their cybersecurity strategies going forward and look at increasingly intelligence and AI, not just artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence driven systems to augment their cybersecurity tech stack. Thank you so much, everyone. And with that, I wish you all a great day ahead. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.